Hello, I'm Kirsty Young. Thank you for downloading this podcast of Desert Island Discs from BBC Radio 4. For rights reasons, the music choices are shorter than in the radio broadcast. For more information about the programme, please visit bbc.co.uk/radio4. My castaway this week is the musician Roger Waters. It's more than 45 years since he and some mates formed a band. The Screaming Abdabs never made it, and nor did the Megadeths, but as Pink Floyd, they became one of the most critically acclaimed and successful groups of all time. Their groundbreaking albums included The Dark Side of the Moon and The Wall, but they're equally well known for their extraordinary live shows with towering sets, vast inflatables and monstrous cartoons. Much of the inspiration for that came from the dark side of Roger Waters. He was only months old when his father was killed at Anzio, and he poured out the grief and sense of abandonment he suffered into his work. Years of extraordinary success were followed by even more of legal wrangling, but in 2005, Pink Floyd were reunited for Live 8 in a performance that their fans thought they'd never live to see. Of his own career, he says, "I've been very lucky. A lot of people die before anybody takes their work seriously." The problem, indeed, as an artist, when you talk about the things that are important to you, is that you expose yourself, and you expose yourself to criticism and judgment on your feelings. How comfortable are you with that?
Well, that's been my whole career. There's no other way that I can do it. All I can do is paint what I see and, hope people buy the picture.
And you're still painting. It's still important to you that you express yourself through your music.
It is, yeah. I still express myself. I continue to write songs quite a lot. I can't believe I haven't made an album since 1992, but I keep meaning to pull myself together and organise some of the songs that I've written over the last 20 years into a format that would satisfy me.
Is it a problem with your creativity that maybe you're just a bit happier now, a bit more contented, and so?
You see, there you go, delving. I think there's some truth in that. I certainly am a lot happier than I was. I'm content, but I'm not sure that's entirely what it is.
Right. I mentioned Live 8. I mean, we can't go much further without talking about that. Bob Geldof, Sir Bob, in his own searingly eloquent way, said it was a joy to see four old geezers playing so beautifully. How did it feel to be one of the old geezers playing so beautifully?
Yeah, it was splendid. We went and we did a run-through on the Friday night, and so it all clicked into place because we know the music so well. And there's this huge empty space in front of the stage with about 60 people working on the site, putting out rubbish bins or whatever it was that they were doing. And they all stopped, and at the end they all applauded. So it was rather sweet. That was actually a very moving moment. And the day itself was indescribably moving. You
did sort of tentatively embrace on the stage at the end of the set. But can you tell me what happened off stage?
It didn't feel tentative to me. Well, we did. Yeah, we embraced, and we'd had dinner the night before, and I'm just so glad that we did that before Rick died.
Yeah.
Because if that was the last time that the four of us were going to do something together, I think it was a beautiful way to underline what had been a long and wonderful collaboration.
Your music list today is, it's a wonderful list, I think, but it's a very tender list, quite an emotional list. Is that where you find yourself now at this stage in your life?
Well, maybe it's a reflection of that, because I didn't think about this list at all. I thought, if I start thinking about this, I'm going to be here for months.
Yes. Are you happy with it now?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, all of the things that are on there are great favourites of mine. So
okay.
I'm perfectly content with it.
So tell me, Roger, about the first choice. What are we going to hear?
Well, Neil Young singing "Helpless." There is an honesty and a truth in everything that he's done. You feel the man's integrity and passion. I can feel the hairs standing up on the back of my neck now, remembering the purity with which he hits the first notes of this song. It's extraordinarily moving and eloquent.
There is a town in North Ontario In my mind, I still need a place to go. All my changes.
That was Neil Young and Helpless. So you're on the road a lot now, Roger Waters. And The Wall, just to remind people, of course, is, it was at the time hugely successful for Pink Floyd. And it was the visuals and the scale of it, along with the music, that really captured the world's attention. As a stage show, a wall is literally built, and it is the story, it's your story, The Wall. It's the story of a young man who sort of builds an emotional barrier between himself and the rest of the world because of the damage he feels as a little boy when he loses his father in the war.
That is very well put. It certainly was that in 1979 when we made the record and first did the shows. The show now is very political. There's a very, very powerful anti-war statement in this new production of The Wall that we're doing. I invited people to send in photographs of loved ones lost in conflict, political unrest, demonstrations, anything. It didn't really matter. With a story, and we use images of some of those people during the show. It's an homage to that loss of life and to the pain that goes with it, which I expressed in the thing because of the loss of my father when I was 5 months old, and which I like to think maybe gives me a better chance than some people to empathise with those in a similar situation today.
Do people personally come up and talk to you? If you encourage this sort of soliciting of people's experiences to use in the show, are there any particular personal things that you've been struck by?
Often the thread is, this is a picture of my grandfather. He was a Republican and he was shot by Franco's army in 1938 or whatever, Spanish Civil War. And it's interesting that people connect with previous generations, across quite large barriers of time. But also at this show, I invite veterans to come to the show. At half-time, I go into a room and talk to them.
Wow.
And it's deeply moving. There was one particular guy, though, who was standing at one of the shows, and he was an older guy. Just as I was going out, he said to me, "I'm sorry for the loss of your father." And I said, "Oh, well, thank you very much. I appreciate that." And then he looked me in the eye and he said he would have been proud of you. And I just went, I was burst into tears, and I had to leave the room because it was so moving. This guy was saying this to me when, so the strange thing of the circle being completed in a very emotional way.
Let's have some music then. Your second disc today, Roger Waters, is what?
This is Endless Flight from the movie Babel, and there's something mysterious and sort of tragically moving about this thing. I like it.
That was Endless Flight from the soundtrack to the film Babel. So let's go back, Roger Waters. You were born in Surrey in 1943, but you moved early on to Cambridgeshire. What are your earliest memories?
The earliest memory is VJ night. I described it to my mother. I remember a room, and I remember there was a door with a latch, and when you opened it there were some stairs behind it, and in the room there was a brown sofa, and beyond the sofa there was a window, and then there's a road, and across the road there are people and they're dancing around a bonfire. And she looked at me and she said, "That's VJ night. That was your grandmother's house in Cherry Hinton Road in Cambridge." So I was only like 18 months old or something at the time.
And did you already have an older sibling?
Yeah, my brother John, who's 2 years older than me.
And so As you've told us, your father was killed at Anzio when you were a matter of 5 months old.
Yeah.
Did your mother talk to you about your father, about the kind of man he was?
Yeah, she did. She spoke about him a lot because she was, A, inordinately proud of him and what he'd done, and B, she felt she was always rather down on herself, my mother, and she felt that she'd been very, very lucky to meet this man.
Why was she down on herself? What?
My mother, extraordinarily enough, she never thought she was very attractive. She didn't have much kind of physical self-confidence.
And she was, because I've seen a photograph of her, I thought
Yeah,
she was a very sort of
striking
handsome,
woman.
striking woman.
Yeah, she was. I mean, my mother became political because she went up north to do her teacher training. She did it in Bradford, and it was a hard winter. And it was the sight of English kids walking to school through a Bradford winter with no shoes or socks on that made her think, there's something wrong with this picture. You know, we need to share things out a bit more fairly. And my father's story was extraordinarily heroic, really. He at the beginning of the war, he was a very devout Christian, and so he was a conscientious objector. So he drove an ambulance all through 1940 and 41 through the Blitz. He was working in London, and that's where he met my mother, and they both became very politically involved, and they both joined the Communist Party. Once he joined the Communist Party, he decided that the need to fight the Nazis trumped his Christianity. So he went back to the conscription board and said, excuse me, I've changed my mind. And they went, I say, jolly good. And boshed off to Anzio in January, and he was killed on February the 18th.
And there is a very striking image in the film, the original film that was made to go with the wall, of the little boy looking in the mirror and trying on what one, of course, assumes it is his father's uniform. Did you ever touch your own father's?
Yeah, that's me.
Right.
Yeah. My father's uniform was in a chest of drawers, in our house. And the Sam Brown and I can still see the Fusilier, flashes.
Time for some music then, Roger. We're on disc 3. Tell us about it.
Well, Leonard Cohen and Bob Dylan maybe were the two men who allowed us to believe that there was an open door between poetry and song lyrics. And this song of his, Bird on a Wire, is so simple. The couplets are so simple and so moving and so brilliant. I love it. Bird on a Wire.
Like a bird on the wire, like a drunk in a midnight choir, I have tried in my way to be free, like the worm on a hook.
That was Leonard Cohen and Bird on a Wire. You've described yourself, Roger Waters, as a bolshy teenager. You were quite, a bit stroppy.
I was very stroppy, yeah.
Yeah, who did you take it out on and what did you do?
Any kind of authority, really. There was a whole generation of us who refused to take school seriously. The grammar school this is I'm talking about.
So you were a bright boy, but you were kind of openly rebelling, were you? Was your mother worried about this bright boy who didn't seem to respect authority?
I'm not sure that I really spoke to my mother much about it. My mother was very busy earning a living. My day started with, Roger! It's 23 minutes to 9! And that was the start of my day. And I would get up and somehow make myself a cup of tea. And the school was only about a 10-minute walk away, but I was supposed to be there at 10 to 9, and I never was. But I had a route where I could go through a couple of gardens and down a side road to get into the form room while everybody else was in morning assembly, saying prayers and singing songs and whatever they did.
Yeah, funny you mentioned songs. What was played at home? What were you listening to as a...
There was no music at home at all.
Why was that?
I don't know. My mother always claims to be tone deaf. There's a poem that I wrote, which I can't recite to you, but it's about being hunkered against the hot creosote. It's about sitting in dust against a fence and hearing Ruby Murray singing a song. I said it came across the tops of hollyhocks mingled with the news. And in that moment I felt the magic touch, the tingle down the spine. That was the first time that anything ever really got to me. And I thought, wow, what an extraordinary feeling, that is. How did that happen?
Yeah.
It was Ruby Murray.
And were you learning to play any instrument? Were you...
No. One of my aunts gave me a guitar when I was 13 or 14 years ago, and I did try and learn to play that, but I found it way too painful and difficult, so I gave up.
Painful on the fingers?
Yeah.
This is such an inspiration to all these people.
It's a steel strung guitar, and it was really difficult. Mm.
And were you close to your big brother? I mean, you not that much.
No, we weren't. We were never close, John and I.
And would he have had much... I mean, I know if they must have been distant, but did he have any memory of your father? Was he able at all?
Yeah, he remembered him, yeah.
Did he?
Yeah.
Do you think that's maybe one of the differences between the two of you? You don't...
I think he paid a higher price than I did.
Yeah.
I think the eldest pays... The eldest takes the responsibility. I mean, I have recurrent dreams, and there's a dream that I no longer have, which was a dream that I'd murdered somebody and that I'm going to get caught. And I had this dream over and over and over again for umpteen years, until after a ton of therapy, I suddenly one day realised, I think it's about me feeling I'd killed my father.
Yes.
And as soon as I had that realisation, that's it. I've never had that dream again. It went.
How long ago was that?
About 20 years ago.
Right. So when you had that dream about your father, you would have been 50. That's a long time to have a recurring dream that you're murdering somebody.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think have you come late to a lot of those emotional realisations, do you think? In your life? Yeah.
I think I did.
Yeah. Why do you think that's taken so long?
Oh, that's a very good question. I think it took me a very long time to understand that as a man it was okay to have power.
Okay to have power?
Yeah. I think for many, many years, because I'd grown up entirely in the company of women, my mother and all her sisters, I think I just intuitively believed that the correct thing was for the woman to have all the power. And in consequence, I involved myself in all kinds of disastrous relationships where I gave away all my power to women.
For now, some music. It seems... Let's have some music, Roger. What are we going to hear next?
Oh, well, it's perfectly apposite. Chet Baker, My Funny Valentine. Not just a great song. Laurie's the love of my life and soon to become my wife. We had a thing about Chet Baker. We listen to Chet Baker all the time when we're playing gin rummy. All the time. That's all we play. And I actually met him fleetingly. When I was a student studying architecture in London, we were living in a squat in Cheney Gardens. And the whole block was full of squats. And Chet was squatting 3 doors down. And this must have been 1962, maybe.
So by then he'd be on his uppers a bit, was he? He was sort
absolutely,
of
yeah. I mean, being a junkie, and he'd got no teeth, and he couldn't play any whatever.
Yeah.
And I've seen films made of him after that time when he got himself together again. And what a remarkable man! What an extraordinary talent.
My funny Valentine, sweet comic Valentine, you make me smile with my heart.
That was Chet Baker and My Funny Valentine, and you said, Roger Waters, that's for Laurie, the love of your life. You're getting married then. Do you know when you're getting married?
Not quite sure when, no. I'm wearing the ring, but we'll see.
I did notice you were wearing a wedding ring, yes.
Getting used to it.
Yeah, because you have been married before.
I have.
Yes. And so you feel...
It's a bit of a habit.
Yes. How many times have you been married?
3.
Right.
I'm not prepared to go any further into that, Kirsty.
Absolutely, I understand. So let's then move on.
Yeah.
Let's see, it was 1966. Pink Floyd had been formed, and of course, famously, it was formed with Syd Barrett at its helm. But in those very, very early days, what are your strongest memories of making music together?
Well, actually, Syd and I knew... He's 2 years younger than me, so we knew each other in Cambridge.
Right.
The band was already sort of happening, and he came up to go to Camberwell School of Art, and we always said that when he came up to London to go to college, which he inevitably would, we would start a band together. And suddenly we got a contract with EMI, and I turned pro in February 1967.
And is it indeed the case that you were recording at Abbey Road at the same time that the Beatles were recording in a studio next door?
We were, yeah. We were doing our first album.
Did you ever bump into them?
Yeah, yeah. Paul McCartney used to come in quite often, because he used to come down to UFO and watch us perform.
Right.
And I went in, I think, twice when they were in there, and it was terrifying, you know. John Lennon in there, he was always seemed a bit grumpy, you know.
Were you on the end of his grump, did he?
No, not really, not really. It's one of my great regrets, you know, that I never really met Lennon. I sat down, I think we'd have had quite a lot to say to one another.
Really? But what, because of your experience?
I don't know. I just feel a great fellow feeling for him.
Of course, we look back now in a sort of social history way and say, well, that was the point at which Britain changed. Are you aware when you're there and you're creatively beginning to explore yourself and listen to what's going on around you, that everything is changing, that the rules no longer apply?
Not really.
No.
I certainly wasn't. I was just getting on with what I was getting on with and trying to make ends meet, you know. I mean, I made £7 a week between 1967 and 1970, which even in those days was not really enough to live on.
And when would you first then have appeared on Top of the Pops? Because that must have been a sort of significant and important moment in your career.
Yeah, well, yeah, See Emily Play, I suppose, which was 67.
Right, and that was when Syd Barrett sort of pretty much backed away. He said, I don't want this.
Yeah, he was going a bit strange by then. John Lennon doesn't have to do Top of the Pops, he would say. Syd, are you crazy? This is what we've been working for, man. Come on, let's go for it. You know, I shouldn't laugh because it was very sad what happened, but he was just not making very much connection with anything that you and I would consider to be real.
Okay. The beautiful song Shine On You Crazy Diamond was written as a tribute to Syd Barrett many years later. It's very unusual for a band to acknowledge the thing that's missing within it.
Yeah.
How did that song actually come about? Did you sit down together and talk about writing it, or did...
No, I wrote it.
Yes.
It's very moving to play, you know. It's like he's there again. Like, he was so beautiful, Syd. He was so vibrant and so talented. Very special, I think.
He died it was 2006, I think, and you said very notably that at the time that he died, you felt as if you'd done your grieving a good 2 decades before.
Mm. Yeah, because he wasn't accessible.
Yeah.
He didn't want to see anybody from his past, ever.
Let's have some music then. What are we going to hear?
Earlier I was talking about I used to routinely, after my mum had gone to sleep, I would climb out of my first floor window and go literally shin down a drain pipe. And about 20 doors down lived this remarkably wonderful woman who's the first bohemian I ever met in my life. She was called Eleanor O'Connell, and she had a son called Seamus O'Connell. And that's me, my best friend at school, who was called Willa, and Seamus, would stay up all night, almost every night, listening to music. And we listened to everything. I remember her with such joy, and it was great for us 3 boys. This was one of the records that we would listen to a lot. This is Ray Charles, Georgia on My Mind. We haven't even put it on yet, and I've got goosebumps.
Georgia, Georgia, the whole day through, just an old sweet song keeps Georgia on my mind. Georgia on my mind. I said,
Ray Charles and Georgia on My Mind. So let's go then, Roger Waters, from £7 a week to, well, we're sort of spooling forward by 6 years. There were albums that are very well regarded, but the one that really broke through and made you, I think, big money in America was Dark Side of the Moon. When did you begin to notice that life was changing?
Well, as soon as we finished the record, I was absolutely certain that, this was the big breakthrough.
Right.
But it changed everything. We changed everything.
How did you feel about being a known person, about being a rock star in those early days?
I think I was so fundamentally frightened in almost every possible way that I really shied away from it in a big way. So I was always that kid who only ever dressed in black, and at a party I would be found skulking in the corner, and not being friendly.
But you see, the brooding rock star, of course, is even more magnetic.
Well, whatever.
Were you fighting off the girls with a great big sort of stick?
No, No.
Really?
No, I never went through any of that. I thought of maybe one or two.
Is that true? You never went through... Is that not part of the fun of being a rock star?
Well, it should be, yeah, but again, we can't possibly go into all the, the awful details of my appalling love life, but I'd attached myself by that time, and had been attached for some considerable amount of time, to the girl next door who I married. I married the girl next door, literally the girl next door.
Right.
And notwithstanding the fact that, I strayed from time to time, it wasn't, a glorious loving. Yeah, I know, I'm sorry. Oh, God, I regret it so much.
I mean, actually, do you? Do you look back and think, I can't
absolutely,
believe... Yes.
yeah, absolutely, yeah.
And given that you were all boys with an education, young men who were going to go into professions, it's interesting that you suddenly all find yourself rock stars. Was there a little bit of all of you that, you weren't quite sure what to do with it?
No. It was an enormous relief, not to have to go to work. I only went into architecture because my mum said, you've got to do something. You must have an education. And then so I went, all right, Mum, I will.
And what did your mum then make of the success? Did she begin to be sort of proud
she
of
loved
you?
it. Yeah. She could see what was going on, yeah.
Right. And she was 96 when she finally passed away.
She was, yeah, last year.
Was there a sort of final commentary on this extraordinary journey that you'd made to superstardom? Did she talk to you about it?
No, not towards the end. The only thing she said about my career was she said, darling, I'm going to leave everything to John because I have a feeling you'll be all right.
Wise words.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, she was great. She was such a great woman.
Let's have some more music then before we go any further. Tell us about your sixth choice today then, Roger.
Not recently, but a few years ago, I wrote an opera. And I became then much more interested in opera than I ever had before. And I also worked with opera singers, one of whom was Bryn Terfel. And Bryn, one day, he said to me, Roger, have you ever listened to Corelli? And I went, no, who's he? The next day he came in and he gave me this. He said, this is mine, but you can have it. And I bunged it in the car, and I was just blown away.
That was Franco Corelli singing E luce von la stelle, How the Stars Seemed to Shimmer, from the third act of Puccini's Tosca. You've said of yourself, I know I can be an oppressive personality because I bubble with ideas. It was easier for the others to go along with me. So I'm wondering at what point you realised, whilst you were making music with Pink Floyd, that it doesn't quite feel as good as it once felt, that personalities were rubbing abrasively up against each other.
I think, and it's not just me, I think everybody would agree, it was really immediately after Dark Side of the Moon. So we would argue furiously about almost everything. But having said that, Dave's a fantastic guitar player and he's got an incredibly beautiful voice, and Rick was still doing great things on keyboards and coming up with great ideas. And so we were still coming up, with the goods, but there was a lot of tension.
So you left the band, famously, Roger Waters, in 1985. So much has been written about the split and the acrimony. There were many words that passed between you and Dave Gilmour, many of them unpleasant. And I'm wondering now, with a bit of perspective, how you look back on that period when it all blew up in your face.
Yeah, well, it was a great deal of wasted energy. I famously thought that we should retire. And they famously didn't. But where people have got the wrong end of the stick, because it got reported, is the idea that we fought about this in court. We never went anywhere near a court.
But lawyers were involved, let's say.
Lawyers advised both of us, you know.
Right.
They said, listen, you can't retire the name. You can fight to get it for yourself, and you probably get it. And I went, I don't want it. And they said, this is a valuable piece of property. So you can't just say, I've decided to throw it away.
Right.
It's worth money, so it has to exist.
And there was a point, I think, were you playing in Cincinnati, I think, if my memory serves me correctly, and you were playing on your own, doing your own work. You were playing to an audience of 2,000 in a 6,000-seater stadium, and Pink Floyd were playing where to how many people?
They were playing in the Colts football stadium to 70,000 people, either the same night or the next day, I think, and that was very character-forming.
I bet.
Yes, that's all right.
How did it form your character? What form did that take?
I think it was really good for me.
Was it?
Yeah. A bit of failure is very character-forming and makes you think about what's really important and what isn't.
Do you feel like you're a man who's come a long way? Do you feel like you've made an enormous sort of emotional progression in your life?
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do. I feel so much more comfortable with who I am now and where I am now than I did 40 years ago, certainly. Well, I'm really glad that I was in that band for the 20 years I was in it, and I really enjoyed it, and I think we did some great work together, but I had no wish to do it ever again.
Does Laurie come on tour with you?
Most of the time, yeah.
Right.
And actually, one of my sons is on the road with me. He plays keyboards in my band, so
okay.
Harry. And he's got 2 sons now.
Right.
Grandpa gets them to come and visit.
Okay.
So it's all good.
Right, it's time then, Roger, for another piece of music. Tell me about what we're going to hear.
For me, it was a sort of toss-up between Bessie Smith and Billie Holiday. Billie Holiday, as you know, is a sort of tragic figure, and this is a recording of God Bless the Child made quite near the end of her life. The vulnerability of this woman is so moving in ways that I don't have the prose to even begin to describe it. You know, when we listen to this track, it tears your heart out.
Them that's got shall have, them that's not shall lose. So the Bible said, and it still is news. Mama may have, Papa may have, but God bless the child that's got his own, that's got his own.
That was Billie Holiday and God Bless the Child. You were lost in that there, Roger Waters, you seemed.
Right.
Is that all I'm getting?
Aye.
And was that an impersonation of my voice?
No.
Good,
No.
I'm glad. Do you ever become, if not blasé, then a little bit matter-of-fact about the fact that you can attract tens of thousands of people to pay for a ticket to come to see you on stage?
No, I'm not. No, I'm never blasé about it.
So what's the sensation?
I'm extraordinarily gratified that some of the work that I've been involved with has had the longevity that it has, to the point that it's moved generation after generation after generation, and it means something to them. So that, in a way, being the permission that I got from Leonard Cohen and the Beatles and Neil Young and people, other people are getting the same permission from me, and that's extraordinarily gratifying. It's just great, but I'm not blasé about it.
So you're going to go to an island now. I'm going to send you away. How will you survive? Will you be fine with your own company?
Probably not. No, I like the company of others, particularly one other. I won't do very well on my own.
Let's hear your final piece of music then, Roger Waters. What are we going to hear?
This is part of the 4th movement of Mahler's 5th Symphony. I made a movie of the Dark Side of the Moon tour that I did, and this is the music that opens that film, and it's to a very, very slow motion picture of a milk bottle flying up in the air, which is a reference to a game I used to play with the guys I stayed up all night with in Cambridge when we were hooligans. We used to play a game where you threw milk bottles up into the air to see how many you could get in the air before the first one hit the ground. Unbelievably stupid.
I was just thinking it sounded quite good.
So anyway, if you listen to this music, imagine milk bottles tumbling in slow motion.
That was part of the fourth movement of Mahler's Symphony No. 5, performed by the Berlin Philharmonic, conducted by Sir Simon Rattle. So, Roger, it's time to give you the books, first of all. The Bible and the Complete Works of Shakespeare. And what's your book going to be?
All the Pretty Horses, which is the first of the Crossing trilogy by Cormac McCarthy.
Right, it's yours. And a luxury too.
Well, I lived in North London in 1968 and 1969. First of all in a girlfriend's flat, very near Highbury Stadium. And I've become addicted, really, to Arsenal Football Club. And so if I'm allowed a satellite dish, that's what I want. I want to be able to watch the Arsenal games.
You're not allowed a satellite dish?
In that case, grand piano, a Bosendorfer.
Right, you are certainly allowed that. I give it to you with pleasure.
A 9'6" Bosendorfer, please.
It's yours, Roger. And if you had to pick just one of the 8 discs, which one would you pick to save?
Oh, my goodness. Oh, the Mahler.
OK. The Mahler is yours. Roger Waters, thank you very much for letting us hear your Desert Island Discs.
Thank you very much for having me.
You've been listening to a download from the BBC. You'll find more information on the Radio 4 website, bbc.co.uk/Radio 4.